Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of RK Leadership Podcast. My name is Rob Cameronpour, where we empower tomorrow's leaders through sharing of our experiences, knowledge, and insight. And my guest today, again, is Robert DeMarco. We spoke to Rob last time as well, but we have a lot of unfinished business. So I will let Rob again introduce himself briefly again, and we'll get right started with the podcast. So good morning, Rob, and thank you again for joining me this morning for another podcast. And we said we were going to make a series of this, and we lived to that word. So welcome again, and the floor is all yours, my friend.
Oh, Rob, listen, thanks for having me back. I'm happy to be here. I guess for just intro is just, um, you and I were good friends. We went through Ryerson together, electrical engineers. You went your way, I went my way. I joined the Navy, had a great career. And since then, I've been taking on the semi-retired life a little bit. And, I'd say the last 2 years has been very, a spiritual journey. I've got a lot of insight, and I'm just happy to share the way I see the world. I'm not saying I'm right 100% of the time, but I feel like I got a lot of good stuff to share and a good outlook on life.
Awesome. We definitely want to get into that spirituality part a little bit later on in the podcast, but I do want to start off with again, we didn't get a really chance to talk about leadership in the last podcast, and I wanted to discuss that topic with you first today. And what leadership means to you? What is your unconventional definition of leadership? And how is leadership applied? What aspects were important in the Navy versus your regular corporations, and how leadership is there? So if you can walk us through the leadership and your experience in the Army. And, I know that you've had leadership roles in the Army, or sorry, Navy. So just briefly talk to us about that as well.
So it's funny when I hear leadership, the word leadership, for me, it really comes down to connection to other people. Okay. It's how well can you connect to others. And I think, some people do it better than others. Listen, I've completed an MBA, and I spent a whole course just talking about leadership, and there's a million ways you can slice it up. But at the end of the day, we're all different beings. We all have different ways of connecting with others, and you just have to find what works. And there's authentic leadership, and then there is fake ass leadership. You see a lot of people who try to emulate what someone else does, but it's not them, and it doesn't work. And it comes off, it just comes off as fake, and it doesn't last. It doesn't stick, right? I think you really have to know who you are. It starts with everything. You always have to know who you are. You have to understand other people. You have to be authentic. And I think when you can connect with other people on a deeper level, people are going to follow you through the good times, and they're going to follow you through the bad times. But it starts with knowing who you are. When I was throughout my career, you always knew who the good people were. Okay. And it wasn't necessarily the people who were handing out popsicles and chocolate bars and all the good things that you want. You could feel people who were confident in themselves. So I remember for those great leaders, I would always look and say, well, what is it that makes them different? Mm-hmm. And, they were confident in who they were. They were competent. They were very smart people, right? And they were authentic. And, they were also people who genuinely wanted to serve outwards. They were looking at the organization. They were looking at their team. They were outwards focused. What they weren't, and this goes, put that in the other category, is that they weren't inward focused. They weren't these people who were out for themselves. They weren't, I'm for my career and where I need to be in 2 years,
That's right.
you know? And so obviously when you talk about other leaders that are not them, you get this group of people that are, so egotistical and so focused on me, that they don't see anybody else. And unfortunately, that is the majority of people out there. So now when I say what I saw in the Navy, I believe that's a pretty good reflection of what's going on in the corporate world as well, is that there's only a handful of great leaders who are looking outwards and care for their team. And unfortunately, there's just way too many people out there that are just focused on themselves.
Yeah.
And you can smell those people, or you see them a mile away. And of course, you don't really want to do anything. You want to have no part of those people because they're going to screw you over the first chance that they can.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Robin. It goes back to, a lot of people are chasing money, they're chasing titles, and they get into competition with others, like, might be their friends, might be their family, or, colleagues, and it becomes very unhealthy. And what ends up happening is it tends to have a negative impact on the people that they're leading. Yeah. And, I love talking about this topic and subject because I'm very passionate about it. And I've seen a lot of shit throughout my career, and I've seen a lot of people being treated like crap. I still hear about it from a lot of people that reach out. And this is why, I wanted to do this and, bring people like yourself who are authentic and can talk about the truth with people and how leadership should be versus what it is. And, you nailed it with the authentic part. I think if you're not an authentic leader, people can smell that a mile away. And, there's a lot of people that will kiss your ass with the title that you have. But once you lose that title or you move away, they don't even know that you exist anymore. Right.
It's funny because, what I'll do is actually, I'll describe a little bit of how you start off, or at least what my path was when we first started off.
Yes.
So we leave university and then I joined the Navy. And then my first, you do your basic training, and then you're going to do your trade specific training, and you probably spend a good 2 to 3 years just learning your craft, learning your trade. So I'm not for those first couple of years, I'm not in charge of anybody. Even if I'm wearing the rank, I'm still not in charge. But then once I start to get my basic skills and I join a ship, I'm a part of this engineering department. The engineering department's 60 people. And, now I'm put in charge of 6 to 8 people. It's one section and they're all junior people, but I'm in charge of them. But it's not just me by myself. I've got, someone who's got a lot of experience, and he's kind of showing me the ropes. And so very quickly, I'm starting to learn the system. I'm starting to meet these people. I'm starting to make these connections. And it starts off by saying, what's your name? Are you married? Do you have kids? Do you live close by? You're starting to understand your people. This is who I am and that's who you are. And when you join the ship, there's a lot of stuff you don't know. And there's that part where you say, oh, I'm in charge, but I don't know everything. So you ask questions to the 3 junior members and you're like, hey, how does this work? You're kind of showing a little bit of your vulnerabilities, and they're like, oh yeah, that works like this. And I'm going to show you. And then you start to build a rapport, and you build on that, and you build on that. Your willingness to show that you don't know everything, or your ability to ask for help.
That's right.
That starts to build that connection, that bond. And then people will start to look at you and say, wait a minute, that guy's not pretending to walk on water. That guy's not this arrogant person who knows everything.
That's right.
And then all of a sudden people start wanting to help you and people start following you. And then you start to say, hey, listen, I got this thing over here. I could really use a hand. And they're like, hold on, let me go call some people, and we're going to do this. And so that's the start of it. Later on in my career, you start moving up, and now you're the assistant head of department. So now you're in charge of maybe, I don't know, 30 people. Eventually you become head of department. You're in charge of 60 people. And it's not, I'm not throwing numbers around to try to inflate an ego here. It's just to say is that as you start moving on in your career, you are connected to a lot of people.
That's right.
And if you're an authentic leader and you genuinely care about people, people will naturally start following you, but it comes with you showing your true self. I feel that goes a long way. And I feel a lot of people are too afraid to show their vulnerabilities, to show that they don't know something.
Absolutely. And I want to touch on that a little further, Rob. So I personally believe there's a huge misconception out there that your leaders have to be your subject matter experts, which to me, it's something I don't personally believe in, because as a leader, you're supposed to be a people leader. You need to understand and know how to lead people. You've got the people that are doing the work. They're closest to the work. So
Right.
They are your subject matter experts.
Yeah.
Those are the people that you develop to turn into your subject matter experts. And as a result, you ask them questions and they teach you stuff. And I'm not saying, you walk in not knowing anything, but you are not supposed to be the guru of knowing how to do everything, because then you start micromanaging people.
Right.
You start holding their hands. Now you catch yourself doing all the work, and you don't have those delegation skills because you don't trust your team to be capable and competent to do that work, and you're taking all the work yourself.
Yeah. It's funny. So on a warship, there's this room. It's called the machinery control room, and it's kind of like the hub of operating all the ship's engines, and then that's when something's not going right. There'll be an alarm, and say like engineering emergency, and everyone's going to kind of go to this one space. And so as the engineer of the ship, that's where you go, and you're looking at all the alarm pages that are coming up, and you want to get a good grasp of what's the issue, what are the symptoms, like what warnings have come up, and then you start to formulate a plan in terms of, okay, well, what are our redundancies, and how's this going to impact our operations, and then essentially, how are we going to fix this, and what am I going to go tell the captain of the ship? And I'll tell you, every time I would go down to this machinery control room that there was a problem, I would come down and I would start generating things in my head. Okay, well, what could it be? It could be this, 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 and this, and this, and this, and this. And even, after like 2 years and you really become the expert, I always approach it the same way. I would come in and I would be central there, and I would look at the team and I'd say, what do we have? And regardless of what my preconception was, I listened to the team. And then I got the core members together and started saying, all right, well, what should we do about it? And I asked the question, what should we do about it? And I let them feed into it, But I've seen other people in that same situation who are so smart, who come in and they say, this is what's wrong, and this is what we're going to go do, and blah, blah, blah. And you know what that does? It makes all of your team feel useless, and they don't feel engaged. They don't feel part, and they start shutting down. And they're like, of course, he's just going to come in and tell us whatever. And you don't want that. You don't. You need to be competent enough so that if they're feeding you bullshit, you can call them on their bullshit.
Exactly.
But it's this whole village. Everyone's kind of contributing, and they're all a part of it. And that's where the magic really happens. And that's what you want, right?
Absolutely.
And I do want to throw this one thing in. I remember when I was really junior, I said to myself this thing. I don't know why I did, but I said success for me as a leader is going to be one day, 20 years from now, when I'm no longer in this job, wearing this rank and have this power over people, that if I see anyone that I've ever crossed paths with, that if they genuinely want to see me later on in my life, and they want to come over and shake my hand or say hi or have a coffee, that would be success, because I maintain an actual connection, a relationship, and those people aren't coming to say hi to me because they have to, but it's because they want to.
That's right.
That was something that very early in my career, I always said that it was more about the connection, not about how I'm fucking hammering down power over somebody. And I will say, and you know, my brother who now lives in Halifax with me, he's like, what is it, man? He's like, you know, everybody, you know, and we're walking out in town, and you'll be at Costco, or you'll be here, you'll be there, and someone will come over and be like, hey, I haven't seen you in a long time. How are you? You know, and like, and they'll know this, you're retired now, you know, and I'll ask, are you still in, or what are you doing? What rank are you? And you still loving it? And then we could just talk, and we just talk, and it's beautiful.
That's right.
Because that's what it is that you foster a beautiful relationship. That's what leadership, it starts with that. And if you don't have that, you know, and believe me, there's some people that weren't the greatest of leaders. Believe me, if I see them, I'm crossing the road. I don't want to cross paths. I don't, you know, even though I'm a very positive person, I just don't want that negative energy. You know, I just,
Exactly.
you know,
Yeah. No, it's funny. You know, the same concept happens in the corporate world. Just like you said, in that situation room, you know, we have the boardroom in the corporate world where, you know, you sit, there's issues that you talk about. And just going back to exactly what you mentioned, you have leaders who wait and they question and they wait for everyone around the room to answer before they give their input. And then you've got leaders who, before anyone else gets a chance to talk, they'll come up with the solution. So do you think you're going to fight or go against your manager's solution or what they want to implement? No, you sit there quietly, you become fully disengaged, and like you said, you now expect them to be having the solutions to everything. So why even put in the effort to try to think and come up and be creative, right?
Yeah.
And that's the environment you want to create as a leader, is that safe environment where you let people thrive and fail.
Yeah.
And instead of reprimanding them, you learn that lesson, move forward. But that's the environment that creates innovation, in my opinion.
I've got to share this story with you. There was this one ship that I sailed on, and I was a visitor. I was only there for about maybe 2 to 3 weeks, but it was eye opening for me. And it was something. I'm so glad that I had that experience, because it changed the way that it changed my leadership style going forward as a result of it. And so here's what happened. I joined this ship, and the captain of that ship looked at all of his key members, and he treated them all as if they were already one level ahead of where they were. Okay, so if someone was an engineer, he talked to that person as if they were already promoted and they were already capable of being a senior engineer in the fleet.
Nice.
He didn't look at them as just the ship engineer. He looked at them as the fleet engineer. And one of my dear friends, who was a trainee at the time, and I was a trainee, when the captain looked at him, he didn't look at him as a trainee. He looked at him as the engineer of the ship. And so, of course, because I'm joining them, and of course they've been operating like this for a long time, is that all of the people on that team were already walking around. They believed in themselves.
Yeah.
My friend didn't walk around like he was a trainee. He walked around like he was the engineer of the ship.
Yeah. Confidence.
And this was all because of the way that the captain saw and treated his team.
Yep.
He treated them as if they were all higher than they already were. And So it wasn't like, oh, sorry, you're only a trainee, we can't have this discussion. It's like, hey, buddy, come over here. Like you know, what would you do in this situation? He's like, well, I think I would do this. He's like, oh, that's wonderful. Well, you know, what if this happened? And all of a sudden now my friend wasn't operating in this space of just being a trainee. He's getting real life experience as a ship's engineer. And then of course that changed everything for me, because now after that, I always treated my team the same way. And I thought there was so much value in
That's
giving
right.
them the space to grow into this spot.
Yeah, you build their confidence level, their morale. Like it does wonders. It's if you understand human psychology,
Yeah.
it absolutely it'll blow you away what leaders are capable of doing to people. So
And if you know your people, if you believe in your people,
yes,
that you know, there was a lot of times where I'd have junior members, you know. So when I say junior members, it's someone who is a technician on this one piece of machinery, and they become the expert, you know. And I would come down and I would ask questions and say, "Well, so how does this pump work? Or you know, like tell me more about this reverse osmosis, you know, the treatment plant. Like how does this?" And then all of a sudden you just see them come to life because they have all this knowledge.
yes,
And then I'll say, well, I've got this problem on, you know, on this other piece of machinery. Can you come and help? And they'll be like, no. Like this is all and I don't have my training for the other stuff. I'm like, I know you don't, but you're a very smart, capable person. And I've got a problem over here, and I want to know what you think. Now that person knows that I believe in them. That connection is there. And
yes,
okay, well, I'm not the expert, but yeah, I'll come take a look at that. And all of a sudden now you've got all these people who have bought in, and they're following you naturally. You're not pulling them. You're,
that's right.
you know, and now you're tackling a new problem, and there's a whole bunch of people there working with you, and they're working with you because they want to help you, and
Yes,
that's beautiful.
that's right. So one of the issues with leadership and the way I've seen things, Rob, is, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is when you started a leadership role, you started with the Navy, you had, few years of training as an engineer, I take it. How were you put in a leadership role, and were you provided with training prior to getting into the leadership role, or did you receive training afterwards? Did you have a coaching and mentorship during your phase of leadership? Or what are your thoughts in terms of the approach in how people get into leadership roles? Should they be trained and understand at least some fundamentals of leadership versus just throwing them into the fire and saying, you're on your own, go ahead and let's see what you got?
So it's funny. I mean, I love my experience. For us, it was a bit of a mixed bag because, so for example, when I was a divisional officer, I was the officer in charge of, say, 6 people. Okay. Now, divisional officer means that if something's going on with the members, I'm there to help them on their behalf. Now, there's staff work. Okay. So, if they have a disciplinary issue, okay, I'm going to be involved with that. If they're having, drug and alcohol issues, gambling issues, if there's going to be medical issues, problems at home, something that's going to impact their sailing, those are all things that I'm going to be a part of. Now, in terms of how was I prepared, some of my training coming up would say, well, if you have a member who's having a financial issue, you would direct them to go see this expert. If they're having a drug problem, okay, this is the path in terms of what's available and the things that you would look at. But I was never solving their drug problem. I was always pointing to them and saying, okay, well, in accordance with this situation, you need to go see this person. And so it was always knowing where to point them to get the help that they needed, right? So either it's the hospital or it's financial services or a lawyer, but they're not going alone. You're there with them, right? That's the key thing is knowing that as the leader, even if you're pointing them in the run in a direction, you're not saying go up that alley by yourself. I'm walking there with them. We're in this together. You know, um, the good thing is that it wasn't just me who was in charge of 6 people. There was a divisional petty officer, and this petty officer is a guy who's got 20 some odd years of experience. And whenever I was having my meeting, that guy was in on that meeting. I might have been leading the meeting, but either during the meeting or after the meeting, I could say, how did that go? Did I miss anything? You know, is this member being served, taken care of? You know, and so there was that mentorship that was kind of making me to become a fuller officer, because they were saying, "Oh no, I think you did a good job on that one. I think you hit the point. I think, you know, we're doing good." And so there was a lot of learning on the job, you know, and you get better with time. But it's also too, are you able to look at yourself and see your flaws? Are you willing to say that I need to get better? You know, or do you think you just show up on day one and say, well, I'm the boss here and I'm great and I don't make mistakes and I'm already perfect? You know, because I guarantee you those ones are the ones that have no fucking connection at all with anybody. And I've seen them, you know. But the best ones are the ones that legitimately care about people. They care about trying to say, did I do the best job? Is there anything else I could have done? Going back and checking in with that member every week, you know, and saying, how's it going? You know, is there anything that you need? How's things at home? It's that give a damn. If you give a damn, God damn it, you're going to be a wonderful person. But the thing is that a lot of people don't.
That's right.
You know, and one very small you know, like one small story is, you know, I think in the last one I told you, you know, I burnt out and I got sick, and, you know, I had direct bosses who wrote me off for dead, did not give a shit that I was sick. But there was someone in another organization, as soon as he heard that I wasn't well, like, he was calling my ex-wife. He was calling my wife at the time weekly and saying, how's he doing? Is he okay? Does he need anything? People who weren't even my direct bosses.
Yeah.
Those are the leaders. Those are the ones that are, you know, they genuinely care about you. And that it goes a long way, because later when I worked for that person, there wasn't a goddamn thing in this world. And even when that person retired, I call that person and I write that person a couple times a year, because that person was there for me when I needed them the most.
That's right.
And
yeah. And then it's funny. Again, you can see and you can feel the difference between real leadership and you know, the fake leaders out there. So that's an important message that you brought up. You know, you also mentioned something about performance management. Now, this is something, you know, I know a lot of new managers struggle with, because there is no real processes or procedures in some places. You're not given like a blueprint in terms of what you do with the bad apples in a group, or, you know, people that act up. What was your take on performance management? How did you performance manage people that, you know, that weren't acting, you know, properly in your line of work? And how did you deal with it in terms of either building a process for yourself, or what processes did you have in place to performance manage people?
So I know it's changed a little bit since I was in, but you know, I'll talk to what was in place at the time. And the Navy had the Canadian Armed Forces had a robust system with regards to performance management. You know, it would have the PDR process was this thing where, you know, you start the year and you say, here's our expectations of what we hope to get out of you. And then you would you would formally meet a couple of times throughout the year. And then at the end of the year, there'd be an evaluation to say, okay, well, this is what you've shown us. And then there'd be a bottom part that would talk about potential. This is what we see that you could do, based on what we've seen. Um, the Navy was good because they would encourage you to give that feedback quite often, and for me, I spent a lot of my time pouring a lot of effort into those reports, so specifically for the final evaluation, um, I was always prepared to have someone to be really happy with me or to be really pissed off with me. But the thing is that if they were really pissed off, it's because they were so disconnected that they didn't want to hear anything that I'd said to them throughout the year, because it was never you arrived at the end of the year with a big surprise. I would have been telling you all throughout the year, hey, you really got to focus on this. You're slacking over here. And it was never to kind of kick the person. It was never to say you suck. It was to say, for your rank, I expect you to be doing this. And you're not really meeting this here, and you really have to work on that. And if they had questions, you would tell them specific examples of how they're failing. But there would always be a lot of feedback,
Yep.
and then, because the promotions are all based on these evaluations. And so I would spend tons and tons and tons of hours, and when I would be doing these evaluations, and I would swear by it. I would say, everything in my being, I am being as honest as possible. If you're wonderful here, I'm giving you wonderful. If you sucked, you sucked. And I was telling you exactly how it was. And, I've never used my power to try to overinflate somebody to get them a promotion that they didn't deserve. And I never tried to screw anyone over to hold them back, to say, take that. But if somebody showed me great performance, God damn it, I would fight the world to make sure that their performance was known,
Right.
and if somebody was missing something, I never had the fear to tell them that I thought they were slacking. I was always very open to say, listen, you're in a leadership role. I expect more from you. If we're ripping apart a generator, I expect that you were going to be there. This is your space. This is your machinery. Why are you not there? Why are you not mentoring other people?
That's right.
It's having a clear expectation of how your people should operate and communicating it to them, and continually telling them if they're either meeting or not meeting your expectation. The worst thing I could ever do is not communicate, have them arrive after a full year, and then have them be surprised.
Yes.
So luckily I didn't really have a lot of surprises. But I think that's the important part of the of that whole process.
Yeah, and those are great points. And I want to touch base on two of them, which you mentioned. And again, it's something that a lot of new managers fail to do, and even not so new managers fail this, is set clear expectations at the beginning. Not when you're towards the end, not in the middle, at the beginning, and it should be monitored, and like the progression should be monitored throughout. And giving those feedbacks is something, again, a lot of managers don't do. And I've heard a lot of complaints from staff when I started in new roles. They would complain about their previous managers not giving that feedback or not even having any formal one-on-ones. And I think a lot of managers take that as an administrative burden. And even performance management has a lot of documentation involved in it, where people just don't want to put the effort. If you want to lead people, it comes with that. It's a part of the territory. You need to document things. When you're performance managing somebody, you got to have facts. You can't just give them shit because of hearsay, because somebody else said, you didn't perform well. You need to have your facts straight. And the other thing is, I don't know if, what would you do if somebody's underperforming? Do you now put a development plan for them?
Yes.
You get them the extra training, or is it right away to, you reprimand them?
No. You know, I guess the very first thing that comes to my mind is I have to tell you is that, put yourself in their shoes.
Yes.
And how do you want to be treated yourself if I was there? You know, we like to always think that everything is easy, but try to think of yourself doing something that isn't easy, that doesn't come naturally to you. So for you and I, math and science just comes natural to us, but it's not like that for everyone else. But for me, like if I was going to go learn to speak Russian, like that's not going to come easy to me. Right. And so I think if I was going to be reprimanding someone who's having a difficulty, I can't look at that and say, come on, man, it's just like learning math. It's so easy. I have to look at it and say, it's like me learning Russian, to say, ooh, there's some obstacles here.
That's right.
And now when I put myself in their shoes, first off, you just have to talk to them and say, what's going on here? Maybe the issue that they're having has nothing to do with their ability to learn, because maybe they have a financial issue at home. They're in debt, or they're going through a divorce, or they have a family member who's dying. So it really starts off by saying, what's going on? What am I not tracking? And of course, with you having that discussion, you're strengthening your bond.
Yes.
They're opening up. They're telling you what's going on. You have a better understanding. And then when you say, oh, okay, so we got financial issues. Okay, well, we can't fix this problem until we fix this other thing over here, So let's get that sorted out. Now that's sorted out. All right, let's come back to over here. What is it that's really holding you back? What are you finding a hard time? Listen to what they're saying.
Listen. Yes.
And then if they say, I'm struggling with this. Okay, well, can I get him more training? Can I get him more support, more resources? And then yes, you're going to document, and say, okay, well, on this day there was this problem. We've done this, we've done this, we've done this, and there's the whole, there's the whole big picture to it. And then later, when someone else is going to come back and take a look, they're going to say, okay, well, there's a story that's attached to it. It wasn't, I just ignored this person sucked, and we need to discipline this person and get them out. No, yes. And I think that a lot of people who are very quick to do that, and that's where as a leader, that's where you're failing people. You have to invest in them, and by investing in them, then they're going to invest into you.
Yes.
It's not the other way around.
Yeah, and I think that quick judgment is something that a lot of people fail, not just in leadership, but in life itself. We're so quick to judge others based on that book cover without, going through the chapters and reading the book. And I think that's vital. And it's a vital mistake in a leadership role. And another aspect you can look at is, and I've seen this happen even in my own cases, is the individual in the right role, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they're a better fit in another part of the organization. Maybe they're a better fit within another area of your department. Do you really know your people's strengths and what their opportunities for improvements are? And I think knowing their strengths and where they'd be really valuable and what they really love to do, is anybody asking them those questions?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And just one last thing I want to throw in there is that you have to remember is that, like, when I was on shift, I wasn't necessarily, I was at times, but that was more just me wanting to gravitate closer to my team. I wasn't necessarily the person who was fixing the engines and fixing stuff and doing all the repairs. It was my team, right? And it's in my best interest to be tracking what all of my guys and women, what they're doing, so that when I see them the next day, we say, hey, I know you were working on that boat, like on that rib. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate what you were doing. It doesn't, even though I might not, I was maybe standing there, maybe they didn't see me, or maybe I was in meetings all day and I couldn't be there, but I knew exactly who was doing what. It's that awareness. It's not taking anything for granted. And then so later, when I'm talking to someone about one of these workers, I could say, oh yeah, Abel Simmons, so-and-so, he did this or she did that and this and this and this. And it's that awareness. And then of course, when it comes time to doing that evaluation, you're sitting there with this beautiful magical pen and you're saying, in this operation, in this time, this person was out in the rain and was fixing this engine and doing all this stuff. And that was my role.
Yes.
I wasn't the person holding the wrench fixing, but I'm the person holding the pen, making sure that everything that they ever did was documented.
That's right.
To support them to go on, and it was never in my interest to hold them back because I don't want to lose that person because I need that person a part of my team. No, you want everybody to thrive and then new people come up and those people get good and they get great and they keep moving on.
That's right.
But sometimes you see people, they want to hold people down and be like, oh, I don't want to lose this guy because this guy is so good. No, you can't. You have to serve them the best you can. And as a leader, it really comes down to documenting and support their progress.
So why do you think, Rob, that they want to hold those people because they're good at what they're doing?
There's a lot of people who want, they get comfortable and they just want to hold on to people. So they're doing all the work. And then it's like, oh, well, my job's nice and easy, but it's not that. You have to let people go and start from scratch and start building new people up and let those people, and that it's an onus on you. It's an onus on your team, but the payoff for the greater organization. And of course, that thing where you're looking and saying, it's not about how good my ship is. It's these people need to go on so that the organization as a whole can flourish. And it's that bigger picture.
That's right. But why else do you think that is? There's one specific thing I'm looking for.
Tell me.
It's because those certain people are making you look good, and you don't want to relinquish that, that power that you have now.
Right.
Because you don't know the new person coming in is going to make you look good. So it's that selfish reasons.
Yes.
And this is what the issue is. It's all because of me. Like, what's in it for me? How am I going to move up the ranks or the ladder in this corporation? How am I going to get my next title? It's, what are you going to do for me to make me look good so I can go up?
Yeah.
And that's not what leadership is about.
So I've got this one story. I'm dying to tell it to you.
Go ahead.
It popped in my head, and it I'll tell you, it really, it's it really shows you where you are in this world. Okay. It's very humbling. That's the word I was looking for. It's humbling. Okay. So I did all of my Navy training, on the coast, and I was very keen. I was firing on all cylinders. I was just taking life by the horns, and I loved every moment of it. I really did. And then I hit my qualification where they said, okay, now you are capable of being, the head engineer of a warship. Here's your certificate. You've earned it, and it's quite the process to get to that point. You have to walk into a room where there's 4 or 5 people who are on a board, and you have to draw a system. You have to know all 16 systems you're responsible for, and they grill you for about 4 hours.
Wow.
And at the end of that 4 hours, at least at that time, it wasn't just a gimme of, well, here's your thing. You had to prove beyond doubt that you were competent, that you could think on your feet, and they wanted to see how you were. And so I got that qualification, and then I took a job inland. I went to go teach at the Canadian Forces Leadership and Recruit School, which was its own wonderful thing, but it was away from the Navy. It was away from engineering for 3 whole years. And then now, after 3 years, I come back and I'm the engineer of a ship. And Rob, I'll tell you, there was a moment of like, I've been gone for 3 years. I'm not, you know, yes, I'm going to brush up on my things, but I'm not nearly as sharp as I was, not compared to my peers who might have stayed on the coast. They might have stayed in the Navy, stayed in the engineering community and all this stuff. And my very first time at sea, or maybe it was like the first 2 weeks of being at sea, I had this most embarrassing thing happen to me where one of our breathing air compressors they expired. They weren't serviced. Now, was it my fault? 100% it was my fault. You know why it was my fault is because I was responsible for the department and that fell under me. So it was my fault. Now, it's easy. I could have gone to anybody to try to plead my case, to try to hold on to my beautiful image of, well, I just got here, and here's all my list of excuses of how it's not my fault. I didn't have that opportunity. It was egg on my face. I just arrived and I had to suck it up, sweetheart, and so now I'm embarrassed. And I wrote an email to all the engineers of all the other ships. And I shared with them my embarrassing story, this one part. And it was like, well, this happened and it sucked. And it happened to me. But I'm going to write to you guys, and you probably already know this, but in case you don't know this, is that this is what happened, and you might want to look into this yourself and save yourself some future pain. And it was very humbling because it was me showing that I wasn't perfect, that I made a mistake. And you know what happened as a result of it? It wasn't a whole bunch of people laughing at me saying, oh, you suck, you're a horrible person. It was people saying, thanks so much. I never even thought about that. I'm going to go take a look at this. Yes. And then all of a sudden the emails started coming in from other people sharing their issues. And now we had this community of people who were not walking around being perfect, saying nothing to see here. You had a whole bunch of people saying, here's how I screwed up, and I'm sharing it. And it was the most beautiful thing ever, and I don't know. I found that a lot of my strength and my beauty came from exploiting my vulnerabilities and not pretending to be perfect, and that sharing your story goes a long way. Because all of a sudden now people look and say, wait a minute, that guy's a real human being.
Yeah. I was just going to say that. Yeah. A title or a rank doesn't make you different in terms of being more human than someone else, right? And something I always tell my employees and a lot of people that, in my career, when you walk out, and I always look at things from a corporation aspect. So when somebody has, let's say, a CEO, CFO, any title in any big title in a corporation, and you've got somebody that's the, your employee who is closest to the work. When you walk out those doors at 4:30, 5 o'clock, those titles don't mean anything on the street.
Right.
It's meaningless. You are the same person walking to the subway, to the car, taking your bike, however you're commuting back and forth, you're going to your families. You're the same human being.
Yeah.
Nobody walks in the street knowing you as, Joe, the CEO of this company.
Right.
They just see you as an individual walking down the street. So you cannot let those titles get in your head, and you cannot mistreat people because of your rank.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And because at the end of the day, that person sitting across you is somebody's father, mother, son, daughter, aunt, uncle, you name it. And they're the human aspect of you cannot put people down, and you can't belittle people, and you can't treat people like shit because you now have authority.
Yeah.
And that's a great story that you share, because it also goes to showing that we should be sharing more of our knowledge and experiences together so we can help build each other up. But we always try to shit on each other, and it's this big competition in terms of, who's going to climb up faster.
Yeah. And you know what? I'll tell you, hands down, that was the way. This was the way was to be open to yourself,
Yeah,
honest with yourself, honest with the community of a mistake, of what you don't know, you know, like if I was to go down in the space and get, let's say go to the gas turbine and, we're doing some maintenance on the gas turbine. If I'm going to be arrogant or pretend to myself that I know everything and say, oh no, I can't ask a question because people are going to think that I don't know something. Well, that's okay. Well, now I'm just going to just know what I know, but there's going to be a whole bunch of pockets of things that I don't know, but I'm too afraid to acknowledge those things. So I'm going to ignore them.
yes,
Well, one day, if that question comes up and someone's like, to me, because I'm the engineer of this ship, and they ask me that question and I don't have that answer, I'm a fucking fool,
yes,
But I never, I mean, I wasn't that guy, and maybe it's because you and we went to school to become electrical engineers. Well, my role in the Navy was a marine systems engineer. It was 80% mechanical, right? And, maybe 10% electrical and 10% other. And so because I wasn't the supreme expert of the viscosity of the oil and what's the pump rate and all these facts, I was learning that secondhand.
that's right.
Is that there was always something that I wasn't the expert on, but I would ask the technician to say, here's this thing I don't know. And it was beautiful because I remember his name was Able Seaman Beaupre. And I remember I asked him a question and there was Able Seaman Richard Thompson. And I would ask him these questions and they would show up to my cabin hours later with a book. And they'd be like, I found it in the maintenance thing. And here's the picture of how it is. And this is the stuff. And they would go above and beyond. And they weren't doing it because they were trying to get brownie points. They were doing it because we had a human connection.
Yes.
And they legitimately wanted to answer my question. And I don't think they ever walked away saying, how is that guy the boss? How does that guy not know this? Because they knew that I was responsible for a whole whack of stuff. And I couldn't be that expert at that level. But I was asking because I wanted to be better. I wanted to know more.
Yeah.
And it was that beautiful community that came together. And I find that more people need to let down that jawbridge and open up that vulnerability and stop walking around like your fucking shit doesn't stink and that you're fucking perfect, because you're not perfect. And it's okay. It's okay not to be perfect.
Yeah. And I think you nailed it. And that's something a lot of people are missing to do. And, as a leader, one of the things I strongly believe in, and I learned this in my MBA as well, is getting to know your team on a personal level. In terms of, there was a story about a CEO at a manufacturing plant where this individual would go down every morning or every so often and greet the people on the plant floor by their first names.
Yes.
So how many CEOs of modern companies do you know that do that? How many people in an office environment or the Navy or wherever do you know that do that on a regular basis? Forget every day, let's say even like a couple of times a year, right? And I think that's the most, connecting on that personal level is the most important thing. And I learned this when I had a field manager role at this utility company that I was working at, and there was a lot of dislike against management because of it was always like us versus them kind of mentality, and they'd been reprimanded quite a bit in the past. It was a unionized environment, so when I got there again, there's so many equipment in the utility world that you can't be an expert in everything. You cannot know the ins and outs and everything. These are the folks that are working closest to that equipment. Not me. I've never turned that wrench on this equipment. So I would go out there and I would ask questions. And they looked at me thinking that this guy is just here to monitor us because he wants to reprimand us, just like the old people that were doing. So there was a lot of resistance, hesitation, and they thought I was bullshitting
Right.
until I did this consistently.
Yeah.
It was funny because what you said resonated with me. When I started doing that, they would come to my office and take me and say, Rob, come with me. I want to show you something.
Yes.
And they would, while they were working on this, they would explain in like details that would blow my mind away because just like 6 months passed, these people didn't even want to talk to me.
It and you know what, man? It takes time.
Mm-hmm.
It takes time for people to believe you, to trust you,
Trust.
to give you a shot. And the thing is that you don't take anything for granted. And I think that's a life example, but I mean specifically in the workplace is that you know you work forever to build trust and to build a relationship, and you don't ever take it for granted. You just can't. I found that and granted, it sounds weird saying this, but it's 100% true. I wasn't just me. I wasn't just a good person to the people in my department because they could do something for me.
That's right.
Okay. If I knew everybody's first and last name in my department and if they were married or not, or if they had kids or where they lived or what courses they've done or any little tidbit of information, granted, this is how I am. I have a big, in my mind, it's this big whiteboard and I see pictures and I can just keep adding to people, whatever they share with me, it keeps adding and keeps adding and keeps adding. And so I have this beautiful directory, even now, 20 years later, I have all this information that's in my head of all these people that I've sailed with or that I've worked with, that I've known. But the thing is that I did that with my department, but on a ship, there's 225 people. I did that with everybody. And then if anything, one day, maybe someone would look and say, wait a minute, that guy is authentic to who he is. He is like that with his people. He's with that with his, not his people. He is genuinely, that's the person that he is.
You have to be.
And so it's like, I'm not being nice to you because I'm trying to get something.
Yeah.
I'm authentically curious. I want to have a connection.
Yeah.
I want our department to thrive, but I want this ship to thrive.
That's right.
And that's that outwards look. It's not just about me and how am I going to benefit from all of this?
Yeah. And Robbie, you cannot change that from real life to your work or corporate life. You can't change hats like that. You cannot be an asshole in your day-to-day life and then open this door and now you're this wonderful person. It doesn't happen like that. That authenticity sticks with you.
I'm confident that if I took any one of the guys that we went to university with, and I took any one of my superiors in the Navy, and I took any one of the guys that were part of my team, and you put all those people in the same room to talk about me, they would all talk about the same person.
That's right.
And it wasn't because I was in charge or I was at this point in my career or this, that. It's just, I am who I am. And I feel like I am that same person outwards to everyone. But that's good though, because that means when I'm operating 100% from here. I'm not pretending to be somebody else half of the time.
Yep. No, I can vouch for that, knowing you for over 20 years. And, you're the same character from, the Rob I knew in university. But I think what's changed about you is I personally believe that you've become a better person for yourself and you found who you really are, and going through that spirituality journey has just brought out even a greater sense of who Rob is.
Yeah. And it takes time, it takes time to really know yourself, to be able to be aware of your ego, to acknowledge your gaps, what you don't know,
Yes.
to be humble. I'll be honest with you. When that thing happened on ship, when I first got there, I was like, oh my God, I'm screwed, and there was this huge thing inside of me. It was like, and it was a very human thing, and I acknowledged it, was, how can I cover this up? How can I try to minimize, the damage? It was, because it was like a self-preservation. There was this thing that came inside me of like, oh my God. But, and, we talked about it earlier. When you surrender to the fact that whatever is done.
Yes.
When you surrender the fact that I don't have control over this, there's no sweeping this under the rug. There's no way to put lipstick on this pig to make it all beautiful.
Yeah.
You surrender yourself to say that I'm human, that this happened, and we're going to move forward. And now I'm going to double down, and I'm going to share this with everyone. So I'm going to help other people, to say that, to help them. And then the outcome was more beautiful than I could have ever imagined.
That's right. That's right. So instead of you looking at it from a negative perspective, you twisted this and you made it into something more positive. And as a result, it opened your eyes to see, look, no one's going to judge you for making that mistake. In fact, like, you're helping now a lot of people avoid making that mistake that could be costly. So I think you did the best thing, and that's great. Is you being a leader doing that.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap things up, as we've come across the hour mark, I want you to leave us with, in terms of leadership and your leadership experience, what did you fear the most as a leader?
It's great that you said that, because I mean, and we're gonna need, a lot of time to just talk about fear.
Yes.
Because fear is, and of course, I told you, I've been reading some of your Twitter posts, and there's so many wonderful things. There's so many great things that you're laying out there that I just want to comment on everything, but I'm going to save it for our podcast. Listen, one of the greatest fears I've ever had was public speaking. It used to just completely paralyze me. And it wasn't until I went to the Leadership and Recruit School for 3 years that I was put in a position where now I'm going to be teaching class in front of 60 people. And I remember, like, and the content, I knew the content like the back of my hand. There was no issue, but my hands were like trembling. and it was everything. I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And then so I went up and I taught my first class, and I'm standing there, and I got through it. I did my second class, and I remember there was a moment where I just looked out. I took a deep breath, and I looked out. I said, wait a minute. These 60 people are afraid of me. I had to reframe it for myself. I'd say, I know what I'm talking about. I'm afraid of them, but they're more afraid of me.
That's right.
And I said, I've got to get over this. I need to figure out, what is it that's holding me back. But once I embraced the fact that I'm in front of all these people and I'm going to start teaching and I'm going to start doing my stuff, I started getting better. And the next thing you know, I started giving myself greater challenges where I would be doing maybe a class where I would have 2 platoons. So I'd have 60 people over here and 60 people over here. I eventually got to a point where, because I was learning French at the time, and I got my French to a certain level, that I gave myself the challenge that I was going to teach a class in French.
Nice.
In my second language. And of course I was making all sorts of mistakes, but it was just building that confidence. And, I found that the more I leaned into my fear,
mm-hmm.
and I embraced it and I started sculpting the inside of it out, is that I started finding that I was really good at public speaking and I really thrive at it. And then now it's one of my greatest assets, to the point that, by the time I left the school, I was a company commander, and a company commander would have 6 platoons. So I would have 360 recruits, and I'd have 60 staff. So you think about that, man, like that is a lot of people. And, we were out once and we were doing physical training, and we're out in this big football field. Imagine having, 400 plus people all around you, and everyone's down in the push-up position, and you're doing push-ups, and you get up and you're like, all right, and you give a big motivational speech. You're like, okay, now we're going to go for a run, and you're running, and you got hundreds of people that are following you. I arrived at that pinnacle, that moment, and I was like, wow, this is what I can do.
That's
But
right.
I remember the fear I had of just teaching a class of 60, and then later when I became the engineer of a ship, and I'm in I'm in a space, and I got my team of 60, and I'm standing there, and no longer was I afraid to talk, because I was just having a heart to heart, as if I was talking to my kids, like not comparing my kids to them. It's just the comfort level
Yes.
of me being at home talking to my kids. It was the same thing of me being at work, talking with the whole group and saying, "Okay, guys, this is what's going good. This is what we need to work on. These are the things to be tracking." All of a sudden I was no longer afraid, but I had to go through that fear. And then now, hands down, it is my best quality. It is, but it was because of fear. I had to lean into it.
Yeah, you have to embrace it. And we'll get that, we'll get into that deeper when we talk about, I want to talk about mindset with you. And that is a part of mindset for sure. But we'll get into that in the future podcasts. Again, I want to thank you very much, Rob, for your time today and your valuable experience that you shared with us. And I think it's amazing when it's raw and when it is authentic, because that's where it resonates with people the most. So I love that, and that's what I try to thrive for. And even having guests who aren't afraid to talk about their vulnerabilities and their truths, and their just being real. And I think that's where people again connect with the most. So thanks for your time today. Thank you everyone for listening in. And if you have any comments or questions, use the link below or use the comment box below, and I'll make sure if you have a question for Rob that it gets to him, and he'll answer your questions accordingly. And so have a great day, everyone. Take care.